The sands of time have buried many secrets beneath the ancient ruins of Persepolis, but the whispers of what once was considered ordinary still echo through the corridors of history. In the sprawling empire that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Indus River, practices that would horrify modern sensibilities were woven into the very fabric of daily existence. The Persian Empire, for all its architectural marvels and administrative genius, harbored customs so brutal and bizarre that they challenge our understanding of civilization itself. Picture the morning sun rising over the palatial complexes of Ctesiphon, where the greatest empire the world had ever seen conducted its affairs with a mixture of refinement and savagery that defies comprehension. The Achaemenid rulers who commanded the loyalty of millions lived by codes of honor and cruelty that transformed human suffering into spectacle and made the unthinkable routine. What we consider abhorrent was simply Tuesday afternoon in the court of Darius or the administrative offices of Xerxes. The Persian concept of justice bore little resemblance to modern legal principles. Their system operated on the fundamental belief that punishment should not merely fit the crime, but exceed it in creative brutality. The famous Persian law that declared royal decrees unchangeable once issued was more than administrative protocol. It was a death sentence for countless souls who found themselves trapped by the inflexibility of imperial will. Consider the practice of scaphism, a method of execution so methodical in its horror that it represented the pinnacle of Persian judicial creativity. The condemned would be trapped between two boats or hollow tree trunks with only their head, hands, and feet exposed to the elements. Force-fed milk and honey until their bodies rebelled in violent illness. The victims would lie helpless as their own waste attracted swarms of insects that would slowly consume their flesh over days or even weeks. This was not the product of momentary rage, but a calculated legal punishment administered by trained executioners who approached their work with professional detachment. The Persian court maintained entire departments dedicated to the administration of suffering. Professional torturers held respected positions within the imperial bureaucracy, their expertise in prolonging agony considered a valuable state resource. These specialists developed techniques so refined that they could keep a victim conscious and responsive for extraordinary periods, treating the human body like a musical instrument from which they could coax increasingly complex symphonies of pain. Royal banquets in ancient Persia transformed dining into theatre of the macabre. The king would often order executions to be carried out during meals, with condemned prisoners brought before the assembled guests to meet their fate between courses. The timing was deliberate. The contrast between the luxury of the feast and the horror of the execution served to reinforce the absolute power of the monarch, while reminding courtiers of their own precarious positions. These dinner entertainments could take various forms, each more disturbing than the last. Flaying alive was performed with artistic precision, the executioner carefully removing skin in strips while keeping the victim conscious through the application of various stimulants and medical techniques. The screams of the dying provided background music to conversations about poetry, philosophy, and administrative matters, creating a surreal atmosphere where civilization and barbarism danced together in perfect harmony. Persian religious practices incorporated human sacrifice in ways that made the ritual slaughter of neighboring civilizations seem restrained by comparison. The Zoroastrian emphasis on fire as a purifying element led to ceremonial burnings where victims were consumed slowly, their suffering interpreted as a form of spiritual cleansing that benefited the entire community. These ceremonies were attended by thousands of spectators who viewed the proceedings as both entertainment and religious obligation. The selection of sacrificial victims followed complex protocols that revealed the sophisticated bureaucracy underlying Persian cruelty. Age, social status, physical condition, and even astrological considerations determined who would face the flames. Children were particularly prized for certain rituals, their innocence believed to amplify the spiritual benefits of their destruction. Families would sometimes volunteer their offspring for sacrifice, viewing it as an honor that elevated their social standing and guaranteed divine favor. Marriage customs in ancient Persia included practices that would constitute severe crimes in any modern society. The concept of consent was entirely absent from matrimonial arrangements, with women treated as property to be transferred between male relatives. Child marriage was not merely tolerated, but encouraged, with girls as young as 8 or 9 formally wed to adult men who could legally consummate these unions immediately. The Persian practice of temporary marriage allowed men to enter into contracts for sexual access that could last anywhere from an hour to several years. These arrangements were conducted with the same legal formality as permanent unions, complete with written agreements specifying the duration, compensation, and conditions of the relationship. Women entering these temporary marriages had no legal recourse if the terms were violated or if they suffered abuse during the contracted period. Persian law granted husbands absolute authority over their wives, including the right to order their execution for perceived disobedience. Court records from various periods document cases where women were buried alive for adultery, burned for refusing sexual demands, or strangled for speaking disrespectfully to their husbands. These killings required no judicial review and faced no legal consequences, being considered domestic matters outside the purview of state authority. The treatment of slaves in Persian society reached depths of cruelty that shocked even contemporary observers from other ancient civilizations. Persian masters could legally torture, mutilate, or kill their human property without justification or penalty. Slave markets operated like livestock auctions, with potential buyers examining merchandise through invasive physical inspections that stripped away any pretense of human dignity. Specialized slave categories emerged to serve particular functions within Persian households and institutions. Eunuchs were created through brutal castration procedures that killed a significant percentage of subjects, while surviving victims faced lives of physical and psychological torment. Female slaves designated for sexual purposes underwent surgical modifications designed to increase their value while ensuring their complete subjugation. The Persian military incorporated practices that turned warfare into systematic terrorism designed to break the will of enemy populations. Captured soldiers faced fates designed to serve as warnings to other potential opponents. Mass crucifixions lined the roads leading to Persian territories, creating corridors of suffering that could stretch for miles. The dying victims were positioned to remain visible from great distances, their agony serving as advertisement for Persian power. Persian siege warfare elevated civilian suffering to an art form. Rather than simply starving cities into submission, Persian commanders would catapult the heads of captured defenders over the walls, followed by the mutilated bodies of women and children taken from surrounding settlements. These psychological tactics aimed to destroy morale while demonstrating the futility of resistance. The Persian postal system, celebrated for its efficiency in delivering messages across vast distances, also served as a network for transporting instruments of terror. Heads of executed rebels, preserved through various techniques, would be shipped between administrative centers to ensure that news of punishment reached every corner of the empire. Local governors were required to display these grisly packages publicly before forwarding them to the next destination. Educational practices in Persian society incorporated violence as a fundamental teaching method. Children from noble families underwent training regimens that included witnessing executions, participating in torture sessions, and learning to suppress emotional responses to human suffering. This systematic desensitization was considered essential preparation for future leadership roles in an empire built on the calculated application of fear. The Persian approach to medicine included experimental procedures performed on living subjects without consent or pain relief. Prisoners and slaves served as test subjects for surgical techniques, drug trials, and anatomical studies that pushed the boundaries of human endurance. These medical investigations were conducted with scholarly precision, their results carefully documented for future reference while the subjects endured unimaginable agony in the name of scientific advancement. Persian physicians developed specialized techniques for keeping experimental subjects alive during procedures that would normally result in rapid death. They perfected methods of controlled bleeding that could extend consciousness for hours while organs were removed and examined. The screams of these unwilling participants were often ignored or, in some cases, celebrated as proof that the procedures were having their intended effect. Medical schools attached to major temples required students to perform live dissections on condemned criminals, treating human anatomy as merely another subject for academic inquiry. The Persian fascination with preserving the moment of death led to elaborate mummification experiments conducted on living subjects. Unlike Egyptian practices that honored the deceased, Persian death preservation sought to capture the exact instant of expiration through chemical processes applied while the heart still beat. Victims would be gradually poisoned with preservative compounds, their bodies slowly transforming into permanent monuments to their own suffering, while they remained conscious enough to experience every stage of the process. Persian architects incorporated human remains into the construction of major buildings, viewing the practice as both practical and spiritually beneficial. Workers would be sealed alive within the foundations of palaces and temples, their dying breath believed to strengthen the structure while their bones provided literal support for the empire's grandest achievements. Construction records from Persepolis suggest that hundreds of individuals met this fate, their identities carefully documented alongside measurements for stone blocks and timber specifications. The Persian calendar integrated human sacrifice into seasonal celebrations with mathematical precision. Each month required specific numbers of victims selected according to complex formulas that considered astronomical alignments, agricultural cycles, and political necessities. Festival organizers maintained detailed charts tracking the optimal timing for different types of executions, ensuring that the empire's spiritual obligations were met with the same administrative efficiency applied to tax collection and military logistics. Persian funeral customs for the wealthy included the burial of living servants alongside their deceased masters. These attendants were expected to serve their owners in the afterlife, making their own deaths a professional obligation rather than a tragic accident. The burial process involved elaborate ceremonies where servants would consume poison while performing their final duties, arranging flowers and preparing food that would accompany their masters into eternity. The Persian practice of collective punishment transformed individual crimes into community disasters. When one person committed an offense against the state, their entire extended family faced execution, alongside neighbors and business associates who had maintained any contact with the accused. These mass killings could consume entire villages, with survivors relocated to prevent the spread of what officials considered criminal contamination. Persian tax collectors employed torture as a standard accounting method, viewing physical pain as the most reliable means of extracting accurate financial information from reluctant taxpayers. Specialized equipment designed for tax-related interrogations included devices that could crush individual fingers, burn specific body parts, and apply precise amounts of pressure to various anatomical pressure points. These sessions were conducted with bookkeepers present to record confessions and calculate revised tax obligations based on information obtained through systematic brutalization. The Persian intelligence network relied heavily on information extracted through family-based coercion. Suspected spies or dissidents would watch helplessly as their children underwent increasingly severe torture until the desired information was provided. This approach proved remarkably effective because it exploited parental bonds while creating permanent psychological trauma that discouraged future resistance activities. Persian courts developed legal procedures that made innocence irrelevant to criminal prosecution. Once accused of certain crimes, defendants faced predetermined punishments regardless of evidence presented in their defense. The judicial process became a theatrical performance designed to demonstrate state power rather than determine guilt, with judges required to impose specific sentences based on the nature of accusations rather than the strength of proof. The Persian approach to urban planning incorporated systematic intimidation into city design. Public squares were constructed with permanent execution equipment installed as architectural features, ensuring that instruments of death remained visible to residents during normal daily activities. Markets, temples, and residential areas were positioned to provide optimal viewing angles for public punishments, making it impossible for citizens to avoid witnessing the consequences of challenging imperial authority. Persian religious festivals required participants to demonstrate their devotion through acts of self-mutilation performed in public settings. Worshippers would remove fingers, gouge out eyes, or inflict permanent scarring on themselves while crowds watched and evaluated the sincerity of their spiritual commitment. These displays of faith were judged by religious authorities who assigned social standing and political privileges based on the severity of self-inflicted injuries. The Persian postal service included a category of messages that required human delivery in the most literal sense. Important communications were sometimes tattooed onto the skin of living messengers who would then be flayed upon arrival to reveal the text underneath. This method ensured absolute message security while providing recipients with proof that the communication had not been intercepted or altered during transmission. Persian military training incorporated live combat exercises using prisoners of war as practice opponents. Soldiers would hone their fighting skills by engaging condemned enemies in battles designed to end in death while providing educational value to the participants. These training sessions were structured as formal duels with weapons, rules, and scoring systems that treated human lives as expendable educational resources. The Persian approach to border security involved creating zones of perpetual terror along frontier regions. Villages near enemy territories were subjected to random raids conducted by their own government forces, ensuring that border populations remained too traumatized and disorganized to provide assistance to invading armies. These internal attacks were carefully planned to maintain optimal levels of fear without completely depopulating strategic areas. Persian administrators developed bureaucratic systems for processing human suffering with the same efficiency applied to managing grain supplies or military equipment. Specialized clerks maintained detailed records of torture sessions, execution methods, and victim responses, creating institutional knowledge that could be applied to future cases. These archives were organized according to crime categories, punishment types, and demographic variables, transforming systematic cruelty into a science of administrative control. The Persian educational system extended beyond mere academic instruction to include mandatory participation in what they termed reality training, exposure to the full spectrum of human degradation that students would encounter as future administrators of the empire. Young nobles were required to spend months working alongside professional torturers, learning not just the technical aspects of inflicting pain, but the psychological techniques necessary to maintain emotional detachment while conducting interrogations. These apprenticeships were considered as essential as learning mathematics or rhetoric, preparing future leaders for the practical demands of imperial governance. Persian medical practices included experimental surgeries performed on conscious patients to study the relationship between physical trauma and mental function. Court physicians would systematically damage different areas of the brain while questioning subjects about their thoughts and memories, documenting how various injuries affected cognitive abilities. These procedures were conducted in formal medical settings with scholarly observers taking careful notes, treating human consciousness as a puzzle to be solved through direct manipulation of living tissue. The Persian concept of hospitality included customs that would terrify modern guests. Visitors to noble households were expected to participate in recreational torture sessions as evening entertainment, with hosts providing condemned prisoners for guests to practice various techniques of inflicting suffering. Declining these activities was considered deeply insulting, while enthusiastic participation demonstrated proper appreciation for Persian culture and social refinement. Persian marriage contracts included detailed specifications for the punishment of unfaithful wives, with husbands legally required to carry out increasingly severe penalties for repeated offenses. First-time adultery might result in the removal of a finger, while subsequent violations called for progressively more extensive mutilations. These punishments were witnessed by extended family members who were obligated to report any husband who failed to properly discipline his spouse according to contractual obligations. The Persian approach to child rearing incorporated systematic exposure to violence as character development. Children from wealthy families were required to witness the torture and execution of family servants as part of their moral education, learning to view human suffering as a natural consequence of social hierarchy. Parents who shielded their children from these experiences faced legal sanctions for failing to properly prepare future citizens for their roles in Persian society. Persian religious ceremonies included ritualistic consumption of human blood and flesh during certain sacred festivals. Participants would drink from ceremonial cups filled with the blood of sacrificial victims while consuming specially prepared dishes made from human organs. These practices were believed to transfer the spiritual essence of the deceased to the living, creating mystical connections between worshippers and the divine forces governing the empire. The Persian justice system included punishments specifically designed to destroy family bonds and social connections. Convicted criminals would be forced to personally execute their own children and parents before facing their own deaths, ensuring that their final moments were consumed by psychological anguish rather than merely physical pain. Executioners were trained to prolong these family destruction ceremonies, maximizing the emotional trauma experienced by all participants. Persian military campaigns included specialized units whose sole purpose was capturing civilians for use in elaborate psychological warfare operations. These prisoners would be subjected to highly visible torture sessions conducted within sight of enemy forces, their suffering designed to demoralize opponents while demonstrating Persian determination to achieve victory regardless of moral considerations. The screams of these victims served as psychological weapons more effective than conventional military equipment. The Persian postal system included a network of relay stations where messengers could obtain fresh supplies of preserved human heads for delivery to various administrative centers. These gruesome packages served multiple purposes, confirming the execution of sentenced criminals, providing evidence of successful military operations, and maintaining the flow of terrorizing imagery that kept distant provinces aware of imperial power. Station masters maintained detailed inventories of these deliveries, tracking heads by origin, destination, and state of preservation. Persian urban planning incorporated permanent torture chambers into the design of residential neighborhoods, ensuring that citizens could hear the screams of punishment sessions during normal daily activities. These facilities operated on regular schedules, with different types of executions assigned to specific days of the week. Local residents learned to time their activities around the torture schedule, avoiding outdoor work during particularly loud punishment sessions, while using the sounds as informal timekeeping devices. The Persian approach to diplomacy included the systematic torture of foreign ambassadors as a standard negotiating tactic. Diplomatic missions were treated as opportunities to demonstrate Persian power through carefully orchestrated displays of cruelty, with visiting officials forced to witness elaborate execution ceremonies before conducting any formal business. These diplomatic torture sessions were designed to ensure that foreign representatives returned home with vivid memories of Persian capabilities and determination. Persian religious education included mandatory participation in human sacrifice rituals for all citizens above the age of 12. Students were required to personally kill designated victims using prescribed methods while reciting religious texts, demonstrating their spiritual commitment through direct involvement in sacred violence. Educational authorities maintained detailed records of student performance during these ceremonies, using killing efficiency and emotional control as measures of academic achievement. The Persian tax system included provisions for payment in human lives when monetary resources proved insufficient. Citizens could satisfy tax obligations by delivering specified numbers of slaves or family members to government collection centers, where these human payments would be processed according to standardized valuation schedules. Tax collectors maintained detailed charts showing the exchange rates between different types of people and various monetary amounts, treating human beings as a standard form of currency. Persian construction projects required human foundations for all major buildings, with workers sealed alive within the structural elements to ensure spiritual stability. These living sacrifices were selected according to complex formulas that considered astrological factors, social status, and construction requirements. Building supervisors maintained detailed records of foundation sacrifices, tracking the names, ages, and final words of individuals incorporated into various structures throughout the empire. The Persian approach to entertainment included gladiatorial contests where participants fought using increasingly bizarre and cruel weapons designed to prolong death rather than achieve quick victories. Spectators could purchase different types of weapons to be distributed to fighters, with more expensive options guaranteed to produce longer and more spectacular death scenes. These events were scheduled around religious holidays and political celebrations, making attendance a civic obligation for all citizens within traveling distance. Persian medical schools required students to perform live vivisections on conscious human subjects as part of their standard curriculum. These educational procedures were conducted without any form of pain relief, allowing students to observe the natural responses of various organs and bodily systems to surgical intervention. Professors would lecture while students dissected living prisoners, using human anatomy as interactive teaching materials that responded to manipulation in real time. The Persian intelligence network included a category of agents who were surgically modified to conceal information within their own bodies. Spies would have documents sewn into their flesh or have coded messages tattooed onto internal organs, requiring their death and dissection to access the intelligence they carried. These human storage devices were considered more secure than conventional methods of information transport, though they obviously limited the reusability of individual agents. Persian funeral customs for executed criminals included public display of their remains in specially designed preservation systems that kept bodies visible for months or years after death. These permanent exhibitions served educational purposes, allowing citizens to study the physical effects of various execution methods while providing ongoing deterrent value. Preservation specialists developed chemical techniques that could maintain corpses in lifelike conditions, creating museums of death that functioned as both entertainment venues and civic education centers. The Persian approach to border defense included the creation of human early warning systems using networks of individuals permanently stationed at strategic observation points. These human sentinels were chained to tall posts or towers where they could observe approaching threats, with their vocal cords modified to produce specific sounds that could be heard over long distances. Border guards maintained these living alarm systems by providing minimal food and water, while ensuring that the sentinels remained conscious and capable of fulfilling their warning functions. As we draw the veil across these glimpses into ancient Persian society, we confront the uncomfortable truth that what we consider the pinnacle of human civilization coexisted with systematic brutality that defies moral comprehension. The Persian Empire, for all its architectural wonders and administrative sophistication, reveals the capacity for organized cruelty that lurks within even the most advanced societies. These practices were not aberrations or exceptions, but integral components of a system that governed millions across continents for centuries. The horror lies not merely in the acts themselves, but in their normalization, the transformation of the extraordinary into the mundane through repetition and official sanction. Persian administrators approached human suffering with the same methodical precision they applied to road construction or tax collection, creating bureaucracies of terror that functioned with chilling efficiency. The screams that once echoed through the corridors of Persepolis have long since faded, but they remind us that the boundary between civilization and savagery remains perilously thin. Perhaps most disturbing is the realization that these practices emerged from human minds not fundamentally different from our own. The courtiers who dined while prisoners died, the physicians who treated living subjects as experimental materials, the parents who offered their children for sacrifice. These were not monsters, but people operating within a system that had redefined morality itself. The ruins of ancient Persia stand today as monuments to both human achievement and human capacity for institutionalized cruelty. In studying these practices, we gain not just historical knowledge, but a sobering reminder of what becomes possible when power operates without constraint and when suffering becomes policy. The sands may have buried the palaces of kings, but the lessons written in blood beneath those stones remain eternally relevant to our understanding of civilization itself.